So one of the things I like to do before I go on the radio is watch nightly news. And I'm talking about ABC, CBS, and NBC. I want to go up and down the dial and see as I turn on nightly news on television, on ABC, on CBS, and NBC, what are the stories they're talking about? What are the top stories across the country that the television news reporting media are talking about? And one of the top stories today, by the way, the name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, and for Chris Krok. Chris is taking the week off. I'm filling in. A bunch of ways you can connect with me across social media at Westside Jeff, on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter, also on Instagram. But you can also pick up the phone dial 800-288-9227. That's 800-288-WBAP. One of the things that I love watching is television news to see what are they talking about. What is it these people in newsrooms somewhere in probably New York or on the left coast, I call it California, what do they deem? They have an assignment editor and someone that leads the news operation that says these are our stories. And if you've never been behind the scenes on television news operation, especially at national news level, what you don't see is this. There's usually a team of 3, 4, 5, 6 people. They have team meetings. They're throwing out all the stories and topics of the day, and they collectively agree on what's the lead story. An old TV news guy once said to me, if it bleeds, it leads. That's what he used to say. If it bleeds, it leads. It's never a great story. It's always a horrifying, big news story that pisses people off and gets them motivated, gets them engaged. That's what television news is all about. And I don't care if it's ABC, CBS, NBC, or if it's on Fox News or CNN, MSNBC, or News Nation, pick one. Doesn't matter. That's what they do. They sit around, identify what are the top stories, what are the big stories going on across the country, and how do we prioritize them in delivering the news. So I'm going through the news tonight before I crack the mic, and one of the top stories is what's going on in California. I call it California. And the story going on there is all weather related. It's the unusual, the La Nina, all the rain they're getting in California. I'm a golfer. I'm an avid golfer, and I went to watch Pebble Beach tournament a week ago, and it got rained out for a day, and it backed it up a little bit because they were getting torrential rainstorms in Monterey, which is about an hour south of San Francisco. And so golf on the West Coast has gotten backed up because of the weather. And it's interesting to watch that because that tends to be the lead tonight and the last couple nights, the weather on the West Coast, this torrential rain. And they blame it on climate change. They blame it on global warming. Depends on what network you watch. Climate change or global warming. Now, climate change, I buy. I agree. You do too. Climate's changed by very nature. It changes. One day it rains, one day it doesn't. One day it's hot, one day it's not. That's climate change. That's not a bad thing. It's just climate change. I grew up in the state of Ohio as a kid. There were some winters we got a crap ton of snow up in Columbus, Ohio, and there were some winters we barely got any snow. It seemed to be the whole winter was like 50 degrees, which is unusual. Now, the area I grew up in, up in Ohio as a kid, typically about this time of the year, February or so, the normal temperature range there is a high of about 40 and a low of about 25. Just so happens, I was talking to folks back up in Columbus, Ohio last week. On Friday, they got a snowstorm for the first time in a long time. Depending on where you were across Columbus area, you got like 4 to 8 inches of snow. That's typical this time of the year. It's not uncommon. But the week prior to that, they were enjoying 50-degree weather. It's like what we have here in Texas, in North Texas. Our average high right now is about 60, 62 degrees. Our average low is right around 45 or so. By the way, the weather is supposed to be above average over the next couple weeks. So climate change is real. It changes by very nature. It's not a political statement. Don't rip me for that. It's just a fact. The climate changes. Today it's 50, tomorrow it's 60. That's change. There's some days we are above average here in Dallas, or some days we're below average in Dallas. So I saw a story a week ago in USA Today, and the headline just caught me. Social media helps fuel climate change denial. Stakes have never been higher, scientists say. Now think about that. The headline. Social media helps fuel climate change denial. So we're all in denial of climate change? I don't think so. I'm in denial about, I'm not in denial. I just don't believe in global warming. I just don't. I don't think it's ever going to impact me, my kids, or my grandkids. Might it in couple thousand years? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But climate changes. There's a difference between climate change and global warming. So the story in the paper goes on to say, it starts off, says, social media is still not doing enough to stop misinformation denying the existence and causes of climate change. Really? I thought that line was dangerous. The opening line of the story is USA Today. And it's not USA Today that's the problem. It's this ran in papers across the country. Social media is still not doing enough to stop misinformation denying the existence and causes of climate change. In essence, what they're saying is we got to get a better handle on social media. We can't let them have First Amendment rights. The last I looked, we have freedom of speech, and social media is freedom of speech. We've experienced this for the last couple of years based off of what's going on politically in our country. If you, by God, post anything about pro-Donald Trump, you're a fascist, you're a racist, you're a demagogue, they got all kinds of big names for it. And now if you post anything about causes of climate change and you're a denier, you're an election denier if you're a Trump fan. Well, if you're a climate change denier, we gotta censor you. That's the message. Story goes on and says that's the finding of a review of climate-related conversations on social media platforms by the public interest research organization Advanced Democracy. So how do you feel about that? Does that piss you off? What do you think? Does that scare you? It should scare the bejesus out of you when you see stories in the papers, in publications, with the lead headline, social media helps fuel climate change denial. Stakes have never been higher, scientists says. And the first line in that story is social media is still not doing enough to stop misinformation denying the existence and causes of climate change. Do you think social media should be engaged in that? Do you think social media, what are your thoughts about social media censoring what you say about climate change? How do you feel about that? 800-288-9227 is my number. 800-288-9227. That spells WBAP. I want to know. What are your thoughts about how social media's impact and responsibility of adjusting their algorithms on what you say and what others say about denying the existence and causes of climate change? You got an opinion? I want to hear it. 800-288-9227. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. And for Chris Krok on News Talk 820 WBAP and now on FM at 93.3. Climate change, social media. Now hang with me for a second. This is radio. This is News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. And one of the things I know about radio, because I've been in it all my life at various different levels, is that radio really works. There's a reason why we have a lot of advertisers on this radio station and using the power of the medium of radio to run their commercials with frequency so that it impacts you and impacts your consumer behavior. You see, radio is about reaching as many people as you can, as frequently as you can, to change someone's thinking or their process. Our advertisers buy the radio station with heavy frequency so they can get you and me to spend our money with them. And it works. It works. Wouldn't be doing it otherwise, right? By the way, if you want to do some radio advertising, reach out to our sales department. They can help you with that. RJ can help you as a sales manager. Now, bear with me on this concept. I'm talking about a business concept of radio advertising. If enough messages on this radio station asking you to spend your money with a business work over time and get you to consider their products and services, then don't you think enough of a message in the media, radio, television, cable, with a clear, defined message can also have a similar reaction? If radio advertising works, which it does, enough frequency, throw enough frequency at it, will work, then don't you think the same with news stories? I do. I'll guarantee that's the case. So when I turn on the news tonight on ABC, CBS, and NBC, one of the lead stories was massive storms hitting the West Coast, the massive rainfall, this river of water coming down in California. By the way, can we agree that the drought in California is over? Almost guarantee you that this summer we're going to hear stories about a drought in California. When you hear that, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember you and I talking about this tonight and say, wait a minute, Jeff was right. Isn't the drought over with all this massive rainfall in the West Coast? Didn't the drought end? So let's talk climate change, global warming, that whole crap BS stuff. If enough messages come across your television news, if enough messages come across your social media feeds, and that's what we're talking about, I'll come back to that in about 4 minutes. If enough messages come from your friends, your kids, their friends about climate change, we're not doing enough to impact that. If enough messages come across saying, hey, Dallas, North Texas, we had almost no rain last June, July, and August. We had however many days of 100-degree heat, climate change. And look at the massive hurricanes that impacted Florida and the southern coast. And look at the massive storms hitting the West Coast, climate change. Don't you think that has an impact on the generation coming up? Just like the radio ads on this radio station? That's what concerns me, is my opinion, these left-wing talking heads in media trying to scare the bejesus out of us of climate change. Climates do change. Of trying to sell us a false narrative and try to ask us or try to force us into policies that change what we do, change how we do it on the name of climate change. 800-288-9227 is my number, 800-288-WBAP. You can also hit me up across social media at Westside Jeff. Back to my story. Saw a story in the paper just a week ago. This was on across USA Today's outlets across the country that said, the headline, social media helps fuel climate change denial. In other words, they're blaming social media for not doing enough to preserve their messaging of climate change. It's horrible. It's bad. We need social media to get in line. We need to force their messages across social media to believe like we believe. My question to you is this: how does it make you feel to know that social media, again, First Amendment rights, right to free speech, that they're tailoring messages based off what governmental groups want us to hear, want us to know. Does it scare you? Should. 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. I'm not an alarmist. I'm reading straight from the story. The story goes on to say, this was USA Today a week ago, social media is still not doing enough to stop misinformation denying the existence and causes of climate change. That's the finding of a review of climate-related conversations on social media platforms by the public interest research organization called Advanced Democracy. Now, despite company pledges to crack down falsehoods, hoaxes, and conspiracy theories circulated with few warning labels or links to credible information in 2023, contributing to a dramatic surge in the number of posts denying climate change last year, according to the report shared exclusively with USA Today. Nowhere was that surge more evident than on X, formerly known as Twitter, where the number of posts containing terms linked to climate change denial more than tripled for the second year in a row, Advanced Democracy found. How dare Elon Musk take that company and buy it and change it and take away climate change discussion? How dare him do that? He is the enemy of climate. He's the enemy, and we must change things. That's what the story says. The story's talking about forcing a narrative, whether it's true or not. If people share information across social media that doesn't conform to what they, whoever they are, want, in this case they is Advanced Democracy, then we have to silence them. You see, the First Amendment applies to things that only they believe in and not to what we believe in. 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. Coming up at 10:30, matter of minutes, my man Sean Allen in the newsroom has a couple stories about update on Houthis attacks in the Red Sea. It's starting to really impact shipping there. I have another thought on that I'll come back to on the other side of the news. And good news for Texans interested in buying homes. My daughter's one of those. Sean has a story on that. Coming up, bottom of the hour news. By the way, when we talk about what's going on with the Houthis and that whole thing in Iran and what's going on across the country, I contend we are at war. The government hasn't told us that yet. I'm not an alarmist. I'm not an alarmist. But when we are putting our troops in harm's way, when our troops are getting shot at, when we're getting missiles thrown at us, and we have bombers in the air, and we're making attacks, that's a war. Yet the government hasn't told us that yet. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. These just common sense opinions on current events, folks. That's all I give you. Westside Jeff in for Chris Krok on News Talk. 820 WBAP and now on FM at 93.3. So we're about, 3 weeks away from college basketball's March Madness. My producer, Garrett, and I were talking during the break a little bit about college sports. He was asking me about, again, Jeff is the name, Westside Jeff, born and raised up in the state of Ohio. I was born in Columbus, now down here in North Texas. Then he asked me about, quote unquote, my Buckeyes and how I think they're going to do in football. And we talked a little bit about it. And we talked a little bit about basketball because Ohio State just fired their coach. I think we're coming up on that time of the season when several college basketball coaches will lose their jobs. It's just that time of the year. And we're just a couple weeks away from March Madness and the NCAA, bracket pool and bracket busters and so on and so on. How's that going to go? And we all get geeked out about that. I'll be curious to see how bracketology goes this year. I contend college basketball has a significant problem, a real big boy problem. You see, we as sports fans, we follow teams, but what drives us to teams are the individual performers, the individual players. I want to talk about college basketball, March Madness, bracketology. I'm going to ask you a simple question. I want you to think about who is the biggest name in college basketball today, February 19th, 2024. Who is the biggest name? Name the biggest name in college basketball today, this year, this season. Can you name it? If you're an avid college basketball fan, you might come up with 3 or 4 names. If you're a mediocre college basketball fan, you might come up with a couple names. Even if you're not really a big fan, you probably can't come up with a name, but when I give it to you, you'll go, yeah, I know the name. The biggest name in college basketball today. Who is it? I contend the biggest name in college basketball today, Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark plays for Iowa women's basketball. I'm talking, she is the biggest name in college basketball today, men's or women's. When in your lifetime, when in my lifetime, never in my lifetime, has the biggest name in the sport in college athletics been a woman? Never, ever. Ever. My lifetime. First time ever. I can say that first time ever in my life, in your lifetime, that the biggest name in college athletics in that sport is a woman. It's Caitlin Clark, player for Iowa. Now, that says a couple things. I'll come back to it in a minute. Let me tell you a little bit about Caitlin Clark in case you haven't watched Caitlin. She's not the new Michael Jordan, nor is she female Steph Curry. She's just Caitlin Clark. But the Iowa basketball star has changed women's basketball forever. Her record-chasing scoring barrage has everyone on edge because she's beat it. There's only one person that's ever scored more points in college basketball. The name is Pete Maravich, Pistol Pete. Now, Clark, when it comes to basketball, Iowa started the season off with a bang when it played in front of 55,646 fans in Kinnick Stadium. That's their football stadium. Hell, it's more people than go to a Mavs game, for God's sakes. October's defeat of DePaul set an NCAA women's basketball attendance record that was set in 2002. Now, since then, Iowa has helped teams break their own program records. All of their road games have been sellouts, and schools that have hosted Iowa have attendance increases of 150%. I think it was about 3 years ago down here, I was watching my old stomping grounds up in Columbus. Ohio State women's basketball, number 2 team in the country, was hosting Iowa. Caitlin Clark visited Ohio State just a couple weeks ago. Sold out what's called Schottenstein Center, their Value City Arena, their basketball facility. Sold out. I was told by my buddies up in Columbus, Ohio, the tickets were being scalped for upwards to $2,000 a ticket. How many Mavs games are you aware of that tickets scalped for $2,000 a ticket? This is a college athlete, Caitlin Clark. She has helped break many records, program records, attendance records. It's unbelievable what she's done in college basketball. She's the biggest name in college basketball. Let's talk about what she's done in television ratings. For the millions of fans who can't make it to Clark's games, watching on television, it goes a long way. On February 3rd, 1,578,000 viewers watched Maryland take on the Hawkeyes on Fox. Just over 1.5 million people. It was the most watched women's college basketball game ever on Fox Network. Until 8 days later, on Super Bowl Sunday, when the Hawkeyes match broke out on Fox, viewer recordship was the record was 1.7 million people, 1772. Iowa women's basketball hit 1.93 million viewers when it played Ohio State on NBC and in Peacock. The game peaked at 3.9 million viewers during the Buckeyes' overtime victory. Think about that. You know how many TV shows across this country nationally don't get 4 million viewers? Caitlin Clark drove 4 million viewers when Iowa played Ohio State's women's basketball team a few weeks ago in overtime. Now, sales for Clark's jerseys or T-shirt began to soar during March Madness in 2023. Even almost a year later, people continue to vie for Clark memorabilia. She's driving business when it comes to college athletics. She is the biggest name in college basketball. That says two things to me. Number one, she's special. She's a generational athlete. Think Michael Jordan in college on the women's side. She's a generational athlete, Caitlin Clark. And number two, tells me men's basketball is in dangerous waters. It's not a sexist comment. When you have a woman on the court whose team is more popular than any man, it tells me that the men's sport is in jeopardy. Here's why. People don't watch basketball just because of supporting a team. The Mavs are known with the big name of Luka. Certain teams have star players. The problem in men's basketball, there are no star players. See, basketball, you have 5 guys on the court at a time, 5 players at a time, 5 men, 5 women, whichever it is. The reason college football hasn't been impacted like this is because you have 11 members on your offense on the field at a time and 11 members of the defense on the field at any given time and 11 members in special teams. So a lot of times in college football, you have 50, professional football, you have 53-man rosters. In college, it's 85 scholar athletes, I think. So you have a larger pool of star factor. Basketball, there's 5. And when you don't have one of the key 5, it's a problem. College basketball, men's basketball is a problem. It'll bear its ugly head a little bit during March Madness. I contend that college basketball is suffering of the revolving door theory. I'll explain that in just a few minutes. On the other side of this, we've got Sean Allen come up top of the hour news. But on the other side of this, I want to tell you the revolving door theory and how it's affecting college athletics. Coming up in 4 minutes. My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. And for Chris Krok on News Talk 820 WBAP and now on FM at 93.3. So we were talking a moment ago about the revolving door in college athletics. It's ruining. I'm going to start sounding like that old man. Get off my lawn. No, that's actually not the case. It's just that college sports athletics have changed, and it's impacting visibility. It's impacting television ratings and how we feel about college athletics. You see, the biggest name in college athletics and college basketball today is Caitlin Clark. She moves the needle. She moves the needle on sales of Iowa Hawkeye gear. She moves the needle on attendance at Iowa Hawkeye basketball games at home. She moves the needle on Iowa Hawkeye basketball games on the road. They're all sellouts. In fact, I bring this up because I was born and raised up in Columbus, Ohio. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. Born and raised on the west side of Columbus, Ohio. Didn't go to Ohio State. I didn't go to college. I went to OU. It's Athens, Ohio. It's not OU, Oklahoma U, but it's Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. Gotten radio and have traveled around the country, various different places now right here in North Texas on News Talk 820 WBAP. But I certainly follow my hometown, college athletics, Ohio State basketball. As I talked to my buddies back home just a couple weeks ago, Iowa was in town in Columbus to play Ohio State women. Ohio State women's basketball is number 2 in the country. And let me tell you that other than about 10,000, 8,000 people a week, nobody cares about Ohio State women's basketball. It's not like it's Tennessee basketball that people really support and go to, or Stanford basketball, women's basketball. Ohio State, when they're winning, yeah, they'll get a bigger crowd, but they don't sell out. But by God, they sold out a couple weeks ago when Iowa went to Columbus. It's because of Caitlin Clark. She moved the needle. In fact, my buddies were saying, Jeff, those tickets were scalping. That was sold out. The game was sold out. You couldn't buy a ticket from the university. All of them were sold out. Almost 20,000 seats. Secondary market went nuts. You were paying upwards to $2,000 a ticket. That's unheard of. $2,000 a ticket for a secondhand ticket on the secondhand market for Iowa women's basketball at Ohio State. Caitlin Clark versus Ohio State, and Ohio State ended up winning in overtime. And as the story goes, the television ratings for that day were huge. During the overtime, they had 4 million viewers. Hell, there are a lot of big nationally televised television network shows that don't get 4 million viewers a week. Caitlin Clark had it in one game. And every game that she plays, whether it was against Iowa State or Wisconsin or Purdue, doesn't matter. It's not about who they're playing. It's about following Caitlin Clark. She's the biggest name in college basketball. And that presents a problem for men's basketball. You see, men's basketball is a revolving door. Guys are in, they're there for a year, we don't get to know them, we don't get to see them, they don't get to develop, and they're out the door, they're on to the pros, whether it be the G League or the NBA, whatever it is. We follow sports because sports provides an outlet, and we get to know the players in the team. There's a reason, in part, why people hated the New England Patriots, Tom Brady. There's a reason, in part, why America's team is either loved or hated. Jerry Jones, Dak Prescott, Tony Romo, pick a name. We love our stars and we hate their stars. Caitlin Clark is a star everybody loves. But men's basketball, we don't know any. You can't name them. You can't. If you're an avid college basketball fan, you might be able to name 1 or 2 or 3 players. But you can't name 7, 8, 10 players because those stars, there aren't any. They come in for 1 year and they're out the door. It's a revolving door. I think that's bad for NCAA. I think that's bad for college basketball, and it's going to start impacting the wallet. They need to fix it. They need to change it. The reason football is king, especially college football, does so well, there's the same number of teams, right, as there is basketball. But see, in college football, you have 11 players on each side of the ball. So you have 22 players. You have 11 players on the special teams. And you might have 11 players on the punt team and 11 players on the kick team and 11 players on the field goal team. So college rosters in football are 85-man deep. So it gives us more stars to get to know. And when you lose a star after 2 years, there's still plenty of others there to get to know. But when you have 5 players on a team and you're turning over that team, there's not enough time to fall in love with players. That's bad for college athletics. That's bad for college basketball. And that is a part of the reason why Caitlin Clark is the biggest name in college basketball, men's or women's. She's bigger than any man on any college basketball team in the country. She's proven it in ratings. She's proven it in revenue. She's proven it in attendance. I say that's great for Caitlin Clark. That's wonderful for Iowa Hawkeyes basketball, women's basketball. That's horrible for men's college basketball. That's a problem. When you can't name players in college basketball teams across the country, that's not good for college basketball. As we go into March Madness a couple weeks from now, that's bad. I remember growing up, I remember still to this day, names of college basketballs. Christian Laettner played for Kentucky. Zion Williamson, not long ago, playing for Duke. I remember a lot of players coming up in college basketball. I remember the names. You can't name too many now. College basketball has to reinvent itself and fix it to become relevant again. Because when we watch March Madness and you do your brackets, you're not going to know many of the players. I won't either. We'll be rooting for teams, not for players, because we don't know the players. When we don't know the players, we fall out of love with the teams, and that's the problem in college basketball. You got an opinion? I'd love to hear it. 288-9227. That's 800-288-WBAP. You can also hit me up at Westside Jeff across social media. I'm filling in for Chris Krok all week.